Texas Medical Center.
Our next panelist is Dr. Kevin Immanuel, who is from the Houston chapter. He is a neurointensivist physician at Houston Methodist.
And our next panelist is his wonderful wife, Dr. Oluchi Immanuel, who is also from the Houston chapter. She is an internal medicine physician and author of Worship and Wellness, The Discovery, where she motivates women to take control of their health.
Dr. Chioma Obih is a member of the New Orleans, Louisiana chapter of ACF. She graduated from Xavier University of Louisiana College of Pharmacy in 2013 and is an internal medicine clinical pharmacy specialist in a national health care system.
And last but definitely not least, you guys have already heard from him, Dr. Kola Okuyemi. He was most recently a member of the Twin Cities chapter, but now resides in Salt Lake City, Utah. He is the professor and chair of the Department of Family and Preventive Medicine at the University of Utah School of Medicine, and his specialty is family medicine. So we do have a list of questions that each of the panelists are welcome to ask, and I'm just going to start with the first question. We know that Black communities are impacted the greatest by this virus. Historically, Blacks in America have been guinea pigs for vaccines, thus fueling a lot of apprehension towards this vaccine. Documented examples of this, like the Tuskegee experiment and Henrietta Lacks, are only what we know. How can we be sure that this vaccine is not another ploy to use Blacks as guinea pigs? Very good question.
Well, one thing for sure, this vaccines are safe. If anything, one of the things that I'm trying to encourage is Black and minority communities to actually take this vaccine, because you can see that it's being used in a very wide range in Caucasian, Israeli communities. So there is a very the data is very, very clear that these tools are very effective against fighting this virus that has devastated our communities. If anything, weighing the risk versus the benefits, the vaccines come out way ahead compared to what COVID has been doing to our communities.
And if I might add that, you know, I do clinical trials a lot, and you know, one of the reasons I think we could have confidence in this vaccine is the number of Blacks and Latinos that participated. So for most clinical trials, we don't have data. It's a lot of the medications that you are using happily had close to zero Blacks in the trials, and they never raised on there that only whites were white were tested. You know, so it's a it's a valid historical fact, but there were thousands of Blacks included in here, and the data does not show any difference in how effective the vaccine is or the frequency of side effects. And I've reviewed the data, and I can say with confidence that this vaccine is actually more effective than all the other vaccines that you've been getting.
Do any other panelists want to add anything else? So in summary, I think that it's very important to note that there has been a number of Black people who have gotten this vaccine, and extensive research indicating that we're not being used as guinea pigs. And I think it's also important to note that from the presentation, Dr. Kola noted that Black people and Hispanic people, people who are in minority groups, are dying at a disproportional rate due to COVID-19. So it's very important that our people are included in these clinical trials. So I think that's really, really an important point to note.
Thank you for that summary. Our next question is, the COVID vaccine appears to be rushed in comparison to the length of time that it takes other vaccines to be FDA approved. Should I be concerned?
I can take this one. So I think Dr. Kola did a great job really explaining this in his presentation. So it may have appeared to be rushed because in the past it's taken, maybe 10 years for for vaccines to come out. But I think the real question should be, why does it take so long for them to actually come out? So with this vaccine, there was so much manpower. I mean, everybody throughout the world is really fighting to put an end to COVID-19 because it's causing so much destruction throughout the world. So a lot of researchers and a lot of they were able to pull together money. Money seems to be the thing that keeps a lot of these vaccine trials from actually coming about. So because it was such an urgent situation, so many resources were poured into this and things were able to get done quicker than going through all the red tape and things that have kept other vaccines from being delayed or made other vaccines be delayed. So I think we shouldn't look at it as it was rushed. It was done well. It's been approved at every step. It's gone through the same things that all the other vaccines have to go through safety-wise. So we know that it's safe. We know that all the boxes have been checked. It's just a matter of they were able to actually put things together. And I think going forward, this is how things will be done. It's not going to be, there's no reason it should take 10 years ever if God forbid, something else like this is needed. Now we know that it can be done and it should be done quicker so that we can take care of the needs that need to be taken care of now.
Yeah, I think Dr. Kola mentioned this. A lot of the technologies that we are using were not created in March. This was a new application for already existing technology. And as you can already see, different companies were doing different things because there was so much will, so much investment into this. So this is really, in my opinion, a testament and a miracle to what happens when we truly take something serious to actually effect a goal that can save lives and not leave people devastated. So no, it's not rushed at all.
Thank you for that. And in summary, I know some people were just joining. Where there are resources, there is a faster movement in the science community. So we should not be worried that things were rushed. We should be thankful that people were willing to put their money and their time into making this happen quickly.
Just to go along with what's been said already, this sort of highlights, the sort of bureaucracy that we see in healthcare today in the US. So, when all that is cut out, you can see how quickly things can move on, especially with this vaccine coming off to manufacturing and distribution. So, of course, this is an issue in healthcare and will probably continue to be an issue unless we, sort of bring it to light. And COVID has sort of done that for us.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you for those answers and for that summary, Eunice. We're going to go to some of the questions that you all have put in the chat. Thank you so much for these questions. Keep continuing to put questions that you have in the chat, and we will try to do our best to get to those questions. This is a really interesting question, and I'm actually curious also about the answer. What happens if there is a delay in the second dose due to distribution or counter reaction issues?
I can take this one. So depending on what medication you're talking about, you have your Moderna that is 28 days apart. The Pfizer is 21 days apart. Johnson & Johnson coming, which is only one dose. The important thing about the reason why some of these vaccines do have multiple doses is because these researchers did look into what is the optimal dose that we can get for this medication that will produce the optimal amount of for general terms, antibodies, and also least amount of kind of side effects as well is an important thing. So for the Moderna and the Pfizer, they did show that within those two time frames, those two doses that they gave that optimal amount of, I guess we could say, immune response. So if it is, 1 day to 2 weeks that you've kind of been off of your dosing schedule, at least in the study, they did have about plus or minus 3 days between these medications being given to patients. So there was a little bit of variance, and that kind of reflects the real life process, right? There are going to be some people who might miss that second dose when it's initially scheduled. So is the efficacy still there within those timeframes of plus or minus a few days to a week? Yes, but not with 100% certainty can we say that that's the case. So the issue that you don't want to run into is where you're putting it off, for about a month or so, because these viruses are still, and we may address this, they're rapidly changing, right? And so we don't want to give the virus an opportunity to develop its own resistance within your body to these vaccines, because you haven't given the right amount of vaccine in order to be immune from that virus. So all to say, try your hardest to wait with, or to take those doses within those recommended timeframes to give your body its most optimal immune response to prevent any kind of a variance, is what we call it, from occurring.
Does anybody else have something to add to that?
I'll simply put it this way. If you miss that time frame, go get it as soon as you can.
Okay, thank you for that summary. The next question, and Dr. Kola started talking about it, and then we knew that we're coming to the panel, is does the vaccine, you mentioned that the vaccine does not interfere with COVID-19. Can you explain that statement? And I'm going to connect it with another question. Does the COVID vaccine prevent me from getting COVID?
Okay, yeah. So sorry, that's not my phone. Let's see. So the question is, if I have the virus, if I have COVID-19 and I take the vaccine, can the vaccine interfere with the virus? From what we know so far, the answer is no, because I already said the vaccine does not contain a virus. All right, so it's an mRNA that tells your body to make the antibody. So it does not interact with the COVID virus itself. And what's the second question, please?
Does the COVID vaccine prevent me from getting COVID?
Does the COVID vaccine prevent you from getting COVID? Yes, the disease, yes. Studies have shown that you can still you can still get the virus without the disease. It might sound complicated. Yeah. So the virus causes the disease. Not everybody that gets the virus gets the disease, right? So that's why some people would test positive and they won't even know they have it, especially folks in the younger age group. So what does this mean? That's why you still have to wear the mask, because you can get the virus and pass it on to somebody who is not protected, whereas you yourself you've been protected by the vaccine. Yes, you can still contact the virus, but it will not lead to a disease. I hope that there's a difference between the virus and the disease. Not everybody who gets the virus develops the disease, and the vaccine prevents you from getting the disease, but it doesn't prevent you from transmitting the virus to somebody who is not protected?
I can add to that. So just like Dr. Kola is saying, so you can still get, even if you get the vaccine, you can still get infected. So if you're exposed to it, you can still get infected, but the vaccine is going to decrease your chances of becoming ill from it. That's what he's saying about you don't necessarily get the disease. So you won't get sick. It's going to decrease your chances of getting sick and ending up in the hospital and having, terrible progress from that. So we still encourage everyone to get the vaccine, but that's not going to say that you won't be exposed to it and actually get infected by the virus. That's why he's saying that it's important to still wear your mask, because even if someone exposes you to the virus and you get it, you can still pass it to other people, especially if they haven't been vaccinated. So you can still be infected even if you've had the vaccine, but the whole point of it is to keep you from getting sick from the virus.
Thank you so much for those answers. Moving on to the next.
Sorry, let me just add something before we move on. What Dr. Kola said, there was something that was very important that I did not want to be glossed over. Number one, just because you get the vaccine does not mean you should stop the precautions, wearing your mask, proximity, not visiting everybody. Because a lot of the ways things spread, more than half of the spreads that we have and why it's so widespread is because we have people who were asymptomatic and people who were pre-symptomatic essentially visiting and not recognizing that, a few days later, a week later, you have been that vector to essentially spread it to our loved ones, our community, and our families. So that's very important to please, even with the vaccine, continue those habits that have been effective.
Thank you so much for emphasizing that point. It's really important just to emphasize one more time that if you get the vaccine, it is still important to take all of the precautionary measures, wearing a mask, making sure you're washing your hands or using hand sanitizer when you are touching things outside of your home, just to continue to make yourself, but also the people around you safe from getting infected from COVID-19. Moving on to another question from the chat. Do the doctors recommend that people should check with their physicians first before signing up to do the vaccine, given that HHS.gov has reported over 300 COVID-19 deaths and scientists are unsure about the effectiveness to the new virus mutations?
I think, so a couple of things. Of course, if you are hesitant, you can reach out to your doctor just to confirm. But there is a lot of information out there to say, through CDC of what populations it is safe in. Now, it's not to say that there's safety in every single population. And so if you have immunocompromised issues, especially, or the other thing is women who are pregnant, right? If you are hesitant about taking it, there is limited data for people in those categories. And so I believe it is a good idea to get that confirmation until it's made more publicly available, whether it's appropriate for you to get the vaccine. So if you understand if you are in that immunocompromised category, that's something that I would definitely recommend you having a discussion with your provider about that, just because the trials did not include enough people in those categories to say that it is safe and effective. Regarding pregnant patients, can open this up to someone else to who might be more well-versed in that population. I do believe the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists do say that there is no evidence that the things that you would be concerned with a medication or something causing harm to the pregnant woman or the baby, there's no evidence in that for these vaccines, meaning these vaccines can be safe if you are pregnant or nursing. So if you are hesitant, I because of a special kind of illness that you may have, I think it would be good to double check with your doctor.
I would have to agree with you. I think that it's never a bad idea to talk with your doctor. Your doctor will know you well, and if you have any concerns, definitely a good idea. However, don't put it off for 6 months because that's when your next visit with your doctor is going to be. It's still important to try, especially if you're in the age range that's, that they're targeting right now that are most vulnerable, then you need to, if you want to talk to your doctor, get an appointment soon so you can talk to them and discuss it and, figure out if it's going to be best for you. But don't put it off because you're saying you're waiting to talk to your doctor.
And just to add to that, the WHO has made guidelines on who should not get the vaccine. And so far, individuals that should not get the vaccine are people who have allergic reactions to COVID-19 vaccine. So that's quite a limited group of people who should not get the vaccine. And the other people are, people who've had antibodies treatment for this vaccine within 90 days. And the recommendation is to wait 90 days before you can actually get the vaccine. So really, other than that, there's no group of individuals who should not, should not get the vaccine. Pretty much everybody else should get the vaccine.
Thank you so much for those answers. If you are having doubts, definitely reach out to your doctor, but there is a lot of information out there to help guide you. Next question is, if I've had COVID before and I get the vaccine, does that make me immune from catching the virus ever again?
So I think this is a similar question to what has just been answered. We don't know that just because you had COVID, you would not get the infection. In fact, we've seen cases of reinfection of COVID. At this point, I would not advise that anybody try to get infected with COVID. It's devastating, some of the things that I've seen. The vaccine, at least what we're currently recommending, is that after you get COVID, wait 90 days because there's still some sort of protection. Now that's going to vary with different people depending on what the titer of antibodies that you have. But you should still get the vaccine. We're saying about 90 days. Some of that is just because you have that protection and because there's such limited availability of the vaccine. But yes, the answer is, except for those handful of people that Dr. Onyema mentioned, everybody should get the vaccine. And one very important thing that was kind of asked, one of the reasons why we have a lot of mutations now is because people are getting infected and the virus is changing based on that interaction that it's having with our bodies. So the sooner we can get everybody vaccinated to prevent the spread of this COVID, the better, so that we don't have mutations that are more difficult to vaccinate against.
I'll also add to that, because I think this also might have popped up in one of the questions, is, the kind of immunity we get from the vaccine versus just natural infection. So Moderna actually looked at this and they compared people who got COVID and their level of antibodies compared to patients who got the vaccine, the Moderna vaccine, and their level of antibodies. And so they saw that there was a more higher level of antibodies with patients who got the vaccine over a longer period of time than people who got just COVID without getting a vaccine, and those natural COVID antibodies. So all this to say, it is more beneficial if we're trying to think of building up immunity to get that vaccine, because it's going to produce a higher amount of antibodies compared to natural infection and for a longer period of time.
Thank you so much for answering those questions. Moving on to the next question. We've seen images on social media of COVID vaccines destined for Africa with writing on them like not to be distributed in the EU or US. This has created a lot of apprehension in many African communities. What are your thoughts on this?
Maybe I can start with this. In the first place, I've seen those images. I don't know if they are true or not. Don't believe everything you see on social media. But regardless of whether they are true or not, as somebody who does clinical trials, there are examples of drugs that you can only find in Nigeria or Ghana or Africa that you can't find in the US. There are drugs you find in Europe alone, you don't find in the US, and vice versa, or you find different names. That's because because of the process that's used to approve medications and vaccines. So companies, they do their trials and they seek approvals from approving bodies in continents, either in Europe or in Africa or in Russia or China, and they are only allowed to legally market those drugs in the regions of the world where they have been approved. That does not mean that they don't work, but it only means that they've not been approved to be used in Europe or America. The process of approval of medications and vaccines, in addition to being tedious, is very expensive. So companies could decide, I don't need to sell this in the US, so why should I go through the trouble of getting approval in the US? So I don't know if this is the case with these medication, these vaccines, but just that label by itself does not say one way or the other that this is only good for Africans. Yeah, I'll stop there. Yeah.
Does anybody else have something to add to that?
It means that FDA has not looked at it to approve it. It doesn't mean it doesn't work, but it does means that it's not. I will advise people should find a credible source of information about those vaccines. They should have their data somewhere. They should have their data on some credible international. I think WHO is probably a collective body that that can lead you to where the data can be. So I don't have a clear answer for this one, but I've seen it as well, and they could be concerning.
I just wanted to add that is a perfect answer, because that's exactly it. You don't know what that means. And a lot of these things that are being posted on social media and on WhatsApp especially are just being put there for hysteria. They just want to make you upset and just enraged and fearful, and really they're just playing on your emotions. So I just want to caution everybody, since it was brought up about social media and all that, stop looking at those things. We don't know if they're true, and they're just being put there to make you fearful. So don't allow them to make you fearful. Like Uncle said, like Dr. Kola said, find a credible source and see what the truth is. Don't go off of these things that are being passed around on social media.
Thank you so much for those answers. I am a supporter of not passing things on WhatsApp without verifying it. I mentioned this many times to people in my life, and it's very, very important, because there are people who don't know to look deeper into information, and they get that information and they just believe it, and that could be very dangerous. So it's very important, something I learned in college, to check your sources at least twice and make sure that they are verified before you go and spread information that is not true. Our next question.
Please, I have something to say. I don't know.
You can put your questions in the comment section because there's so many and we're trying to make sure that we honor the time of everybody. And we'll make sure. Sorry, what? Okay, so lately there have been reports of people dying from the vaccine. That scares me a bit. How should I navigate those emotions, and what are your thoughts on those stories?
Okay.
I also rephrase the question a little bit. People have been seeing reports of people dying, not necessarily from the vaccine, but after receiving the vaccine from COVID. So we want to understand and kind of get more knowledgeable about your thoughts on people dying after receiving the COVID vaccine.
Does anybody want to take that? I can start.
Sure.
So that is why you do clinical trials, all right? Because vaccine or no vaccine, on any given day, people die, right? So when you do clinical trials, when you have 40,000 people, 20,000 of them got the vaccine, 20,000 got the placebo, like a sugar injection, right? And then they monitor in both groups how many people report various health complaints and how many people die, right? And then they compare, if 10 people died in the vaccine group and no people died in the placebo group, then you can it tests the hypothesis that the vaccine killed more people than those who didn't get the vaccine. But if 20 people died in the vaccine group and 20 people died in the placebo group, people died in the vaccine group, but you cannot say that they died because of the vaccine. So the clinical trials are the most objective way to ascertain whether a particular side effect or death is due to the vaccine. So one of the ways they look at that is, I think one that I've seen commonly is the Bell's palsy. I've had reports about Bell's palsy after getting the vaccine. And the way to simply answer that question, whether the Bell's palsy is due to vaccine, is look at the population level. What are the numbers of cases of Bell's palsy that you expect at any given time in the population? And you ask yourself, is that number higher in the vaccine group than the general population? And the data I've seen so far, of course, things might change, but the data I've seen so far is that the number of Bell's palsy among people who got the vaccine is still within what you expect among people who didn't get the vaccine. So the issue of people dying from after they get the vaccine, so people can die after getting the vaccine doesn't mean they die of the vaccine. So that number is not different than what is as an epidemiologist, that I look at numbers, but as I think the two Dr. Immanuel have said, don't just be carried away when somebody says, "Oh, I knew a coworker who got a vaccine and then he or she died a day later." That by itself means nothing. I mean, the death means something, but it doesn't mean that they died from the vaccine. As far as we know, data has not shown that there are more deaths from the vaccine than what you expect in the general population.
So to kind of reiterate what Dr. Kola has said, a lot of people die for a lot of different reasons. One of the big killers now is COVID. We've lost, at least in the US alone, more than 400,000. So we know that that kills people. The vaccine within itself, most of the reactions that you actually see, a good percentage, almost 90%, were going to happen within the first 5 minutes, which is why they typically will watch you for a period of time, especially for those people who have had previous reaction like anaphylaxis. But to say that somebody received the vaccine today and then 2 weeks later they died does not really equate causality. Because to me, it's in a clinical trial setting, that's when you can kind of really establish how safe these vaccines are. And even with the reactions, I think the last data I saw for Pfizer was 11.1 out of almost 1.8 million people that had gotten the vaccine had some type of reaction, not death, just some type of reaction. Those numbers are better numbers that I will take any day over your risk of getting COVID and ending up in the ICU. So it's, to me, it's a no-brainer.
I think that from the answers to this question, we can really kind of solidify in our minds that correlation does not mean causation. Just because someone has passed away post getting a COVID vaccine does not mean the vaccine caused their death. Moving on to the next question. Again, thank you all so much for continuously adding questions to the chat that our panelists can answer. And I'm going to combine these next two questions together. There are currently 2 vaccines approved for use, Pfizer and Moderna, and it seems that some might be in the pipeline by other manufacturers. There are different effective percentages for these vaccines. How does one decide which one to take? Is that even an option for individuals? Or has the government chosen the one that each person is supposed to take? And then secondly, is it true that India is developing a vaccine that will be distributed to third world countries? If so, what will the effectiveness be in comparison to the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine?
I can answer the first part. I think the best vaccine is the one that's available to you. So even looking at the efficacy of these vaccines, they're pretty good compared to, I think FDA's threshold is like 50%, 60% in order to be approved. So these vaccines having these such high efficacy, it's much better compared to, your flu vaccine or whatnot. So really the best vaccine is the one that's there. It's going to be very difficult for you to call every pharmacy and say, I want the Pfizer. Do you have the Pfizer? No, we have Moderna. I mean, the ones that are approved or authorized because they are safe and effective. So that's what I would recommend there.
I agree. And I just wanted to point out, a lot of people may not know there are different flu vaccines and different manufacturers of them, but nobody goes and says, which flu vaccine is Walgreens offering today? So like she said, like Dr. Chioma said, get whichever one is going to be available to you that you can get as soon as possible.
Yeah, so the thing about India, India happens to be one of the countries that has made the most unprecedented investment in pharmaceutical technology. And they've been able. I have no stocks in big pharma. I don't have any, and they have arrangements with a lot of big pharmaceutical companies that allows them to have massive productions, either of medications or, in this case, vaccines, at a relatively inexpensive rates compared to what's available in other countries. So it's the investment that India has made that allowed them to be, that they will likely be a big player, outside of what's available in the US, for the rest of the world. So again, from the information and data that I have, I don't believe because it's made in India makes it makes it inferior, or because it's only it's mostly marketed to the third world countries makes it inferior. What are the chances of the rich countries that they've bought up all Pfizer and Moderna and Johnson & Johnson vaccines. They bought them up, and but then you have billions of people in Africa and Asia that may not have access to even any of these vaccines. So I don't have any information to show that vaccines coming out of India are inferior. I'll stop there. But if anybody knows more, then maybe they can speak.
Okay.
Quick. Oh, sorry, Eunice. Really quickly, I actually was researching this Indian company that was going to be making the vaccine for. I didn't see that they were making vaccines for third world countries, but they're actually in partnership with a U.S. company called Ocugen, and they recently, I think just either yesterday or the day before yesterday, came together and made a partnership for actually not bringing the Indian COVID vaccine into third world countries, but actually bringing their vaccine into the US. So I think that this vaccine is just another vaccine that that is currently being used in India, but they're trying to bring into the US so that there is another option for vaccines that US citizens could also be taking as well.
Thank you for that research. There are a lot of vaccines being going through the process right now. So we are going to be hearing a lot about that. And just like we've been reiterating through this entire thing, make sure you're doing your research. Make sure that you are not buying into fear that people might be trying to put out there, but that you're making decisions based on knowledge. And that actually comes to this next question. There are many healthcare workers who are apprehensive about the vaccine. Why is there such a disparity between healthcare workers in support of the vaccine and others who are not? And is that something to be concerned by as normal consumers?
I'll put it this way. Everybody has a skill set. Even amongst this panel, we all kind of have a skill set. Just because you're a healthcare worker does not make you knowledgeable about this particular virus, as well as the vaccine. For example, I'm a neurologist and a critical care specialist. I don't know much about OBGYN. I'm pretty much a layperson when it comes to that, well, in some aspects. So it's once again very, very important to have credible sources. So just because your friend who's a nurse does not believe in the vaccine does not mean that the vaccine is not efficacious or it's going to do something harmful to you. And to me, one thing that always kind of comes to mind whenever I deal with these kind of new situations is it's even biblical that our people perish because of a lack of knowledge. So we need to get ourselves educated and have some wisdom as to making these decisions rather than basing them on what our friends or colleagues may have, because just because you're a doctor or whatever does not make you infallible. The knowledge and the data is really what's important, and I would focus on that.
And yes, I agree with that. But this variance really shows, it reflects the society we're in. Just because we're in the healthcare field doesn't make us, like you said, more knowledgeable. But the fear Now the problem comes if when you've been provided the information, when you have the objective information, but you still reach out to, lean on your fears, lean on myths. That's where the problem is. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to be hesitant, but when provided the information, you really have to go with the objective information and not, go back to those fears that are circulating around.
I wanted to add, just like they said, I think fear is the biggest reason. When we've done things the same way for a long time, it's hard to change things. So anything new automatically kind of brings this new anxiety of, is it going to work? What's going to happen? So it's understandable, but just like Dr. Eze was saying, once you have the facts, once you have the knowledge, that's when it's time to let go of fear. And especially as Christians, God has not given us a spirit of fear. So I think that we really need to make sure that if fear is what is keeping us from looking into this and doing our research and accepting what's going on, then that is the problem. And that's something that we need to address completely. So I think even in the medical field, when people are still hesitant about it and they do have the knowledge, I think it's just they haven't let go of that fear yet. And the ability to accept kind of what's going on and the direction that we need to go into.
So clearly it's very important to note that people have specialties and not everybody should be speaking on subjects that they don't know entirely about. And this just again calls for the importance of researching anything that anybody tells you and just trying to identify what the facts are from people who actually know what they're talking about. So moving on to the next question. In Dr. Kola's presentation, one of the reasons why he said that the vaccine has come about so quickly is because of the amount of funding that has been available for creating this COVID-19 vaccine. So someone asked, if it's about availability of funding, is there any investment being made to test African herbs, remedies that are currently being promoted in the continent of Africa? I actually know of someone doing research who recently got an NIH grant to use a plant from, I'm pretty sure, Nigeria. Don't remember what the plant is called. Terribly sorry, everyone. But they're using this plant to extract a specific molecule within the plant that actually has been shown to prevent people from getting COVID. So I know that there is research in that sector using a plant, again, derived from Nigeria to work on some COVID vaccines or COVID treatment or COVID preventive measures.
Does anyone want to add to that? I feel like that gave a really good answer. So thank you. Yes, thank you for answering that question. And this is a question that I have seen a lot on social media, even in our young adults WhatsApp. Does the vaccine control against the new variants that have been shown to come out?
So far, we don't have data yet on Moderna and Pfizer vaccines because those ones came up before these variants, so they have not been tested against the variants. As far as we know so far, that data is not out. But the new ones coming up, the J&J, I know they've tested on the new variants. It is less effective on the South Africa variant. So that we know so far. It's about 50% efficacy compared to the variant in the US. So that part we know, but I'm sure there'll be more data coming out with the Moderna and Pfizer being tested on these new variants that are coming out.
Yeah, at least the information that I hear coming from the Moderna guys, I think more than Pfizer, is that the UK variant is, the vaccine is still effective. The South African one a little less effective. I don't know what those percentages are, but for me, that highlights the urgency for us to get vaccinated based on the current technology and availability of vaccines before we create more mutations that become more resistant to the current vaccines, because the vaccines, especially the Moderna and the Pfizer one, are directed against a particular spike protein. Now, if that protein mutates, you have an issue. But one of the things that we do know is that because we have the genome of SARS-CoV-2, is that there can be boosters that can be given against these new mutations. But still, the goal is you don't want 100,000 mutations out there. You want to get people as vaccinated to try and eradicate this as soon as possible, especially right now that we have kind of the will of the world to stop this pandemic.
Does any of our other panelists want to answer this question?
Just real quick to add, I think that's also the importance of us continuing to wear masks and everything like that, because we also, in the event that we may be infected with those variants, we don't want it to spread while we're still trying to get all the vaccinations. And, you know, even in the US, like for people who are unfamiliar with why they call them like the South African versus the UK, it's just, this is the first place that they kind of designated, this is where we're finding this variant. It's not to say that everyone in that country are responsible for that variant. So those variants might be here, or they are, but you know, like the virus is also having its own variants in the US with its own potential questionable efficacy. So still continue to wear masks and everything like that so we prevent the spread.
Thank you so much for just solidifying that fact, to keep yourself and everyone around you as safe as possible by continuing these preventative measures to prevent potentially getting infected by one of the COVID-19 variants. Moving on, are there any ongoing tests on people who have recovered from COVID-19 to study immunity?
Yes. So I did reference one earlier that Moderna did. And so they kind of looked at, they looked at everyone, but specifically the older age population. If you really dig into the data, the Moderna vaccine is just slightly less effective in that age greater than 65 compared to the average of everyone. So they looked at the just that immunity, the antibodies in those patients who are naturally infected. And I think after about 4 months out, they saw way fewer antibodies in that older population, age greater than 65. And those who were vaccinated, they saw about almost a 50% reduction in antibodies. So let's say you had 100% antibodies 4 months later after the Moderna one. If you're age greater than 65, you have about 50% of that. Now, is that to say now you have to get a booster shot in 4 months? No, because we really don't have like that information to say you need X number of antibodies in order to be immune. We don't have that number for anybody. So basically the goal is always just boost up immunity as much as we can. But what they are seeing though, is that even if you got the vaccine and you're at 50%, it's still higher than people who are naturally infected. So they still believe it's still effective at 50% of your tank being full compared to patients who were naturally infected. I don't know if that was the question that they were asking, but they are just looking at people for long periods of time to see, you know, what is their antibody response to these things.
I think the question is also kind of asking, what about people who haven't been vaccinated that contracted COVID-19 and then got better? Like, what would their immunity look like?
Yeah, so still pretty low, which is why they have that 90-day gap. They think that you're still safe and immune for 90 days after that natural infection. So they're still okay-ish, maybe. It can vary.
Anybody else? I think it's, for me personally, I think it's really exciting that we get to see science in real life. Like I've gone to classes, I have my degree in these things, but to be able to see how a virus can just change the world, and then so much work is being done. And I think something that we have to remember is that because it is taking place in real time, there's a lot of things that we will not know immediately. We are learning new things all the time, and that's not because the scientists are making things up or shouldn't be believed. It's because this is something completely new to our world, and we will be learning about it. And that actually brings to the next question. What are the known side effects of the vaccine? Since it was made available in less than a year, is there a possibility that new side effects that researchers haven't considered may appear? Anyone can take this.
The question, sorry, can you repeat the question?
What are the known current side effects of the vaccine? Since it was made available in less than a year, is there a possibility that new side effects that researchers haven't considered may appear? So should we be worried that there are going to be side effects that show up in like another year that nobody knows about?
So I'll frame that answer this way, and this is kind of what also helped my rationale. And one of the reasons I got the vaccine in addition to the data is, number one, we know that there's a devastating effect of COVID. And a lot of these effects are not just when you're initially infected with just a fever. I still have people who are coming in where COVID is now just like any other chronic illness, like hypertension and diabetes. Is also they were infected with COVID in July. A lot of these people do not recover. I have some colleagues, not in state, but when things were going on in New York, that got infected with COVID. And now he cannot perform his job because he can't climb upstairs. He can barely walk, within his house because of his respiratory issues. The side effects for the vaccine are mainly benign. A lot of them are going to be fatigue. And typically, we've seen that these happen after the second dose. A lot of people feel may have fever for a day, and these are not high-grade fevers. These are kind of low grades in the 99s and maybe low 100s, but last for about a day. So fatigue, some people have cramping, very, very few people have anaphylactic shock, but typically those are people who have had reactions to other vaccines or certain ingredients of the vaccine. So for those people, if you know that you have trouble when you get vaccines, certainly contact your physician. But this is one of the reasons why when people are initially inoculated with the vaccine, is typically a week period to examine you, because like I said, it happens typically within the first 5 to 10 minutes. For most of these reactions, but they are benign compared to the scourge of COVID infection.
Yeah, to add, to underscore the point Dr. Kevin made, most people are thinking as COVID as a virus that they can just blow away. That, as when we say many people are asymptomatic, and even if you get the disease, you recover. There is a growing percentage of people who have COVID we call them, what's the term now? Long haulers, COVID long haulers. Yes, for months, they still have chronic symptoms. They feel terribly weak. They cannot go back to work. Their breathing is not right. Their heart is not working well. It can be devastating, and that for months. So compared to low grade fever, fatigue, muscle ache, for a few days, it's a risk that is not worth taking. Yeah, some side effects may show up. In in 5 years, in 10 years, don't succumb to fear. There are. It is true for any medication or for most medications. That's why they continue to monitor side effects as millions and millions, hundreds of millions take this. Something is going to show up. But that the fact that it takes millions upon millions of people before you find a case tells you how extremely rare those side effects are. And I wouldn't, because of that, take chances with something that can, have a significant impact, sometimes devastating long-term impact on your life.
Yeah, and one other important thing that I also tell people too, just as a lot of people are really now focused on what are the long-term impacts of the vaccines, I'm also worried about what the long-term impacts of this COVID virus are. For example, in Nigeria, growing up, if somebody had chickenpox, we threw them in with the room, so everybody got chickenpox. But now, as a neurologist, I know that there's reactivation and it can give you shingles when you're much older. So I don't know if that was really the best practice. So that's why I'm more concerned about the virus that I know kills and destroys than the vaccine that is helpful.
And just to go off of that, the long-term effects. So some of these companies, Pfizer and Moderna, I believe with Moderna, they started their phase 1 in March of 2020. So we're almost a year out, which is pretty long term for a lot of vaccine data. Most vaccine data, we are not super concerned with the long-term side effects. When you think about it, flu shots, all of those things, we're not monitoring for that long, but they are going to be looking and follow these patients for at least 2 years. But at least for these earlier vaccines, we're coming up on about a year's worth of long-term data. And so far, they haven't had those major issues that we might be worried about in terms of, mutations and all of those things.
Thank you so much for all of those answers. I think that in general, while some may be concerned about long-term COVID vaccine, a lot of physicians like Dr. Kevin and Dr. Chioma emphasized are concerned about the long-term effects of the COVID virus itself. So all in all, is really important to just, again, continue to protect yourself. Moving on to the next question, and I'm going to answer this because I believe our panelists have answered this question and it was featured in the presentation, but the person that asked this may have just missed the presentation initially. Is the Johnson & Johnson vaccine technology the same as the two others? It is not. The Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine, as each of our panelists and Dr. Kola has stated, the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are both mRNA vaccines, while the Johnson & Johnson is an adenovirus vaccine. And why are they, Johnson & Johnson, able to achieve such a high efficacy with one dose vaccine? And besides the dose, what are the differences between the vaccines?
All right, I will answer that question. Uh, so the way a lot of these vaccines and the speed affects what kind of comes out first. mRNA is a little bit easier to do, which is why they use that as a delivery method to obtain that part of your cell that actually manufactures a lot of the protein and the antibody. Johnson & Johnson uses more adenovirus vector, which is a little bit different. Now, whenever you're studying something, you always kind of have to set a question, a hypothesis first, in order to know if the answer that you're given is actually valid. In this case, the Pfizer and the Moderna folks figured that it was 2 shots in order to achieve a certain level of efficacy for this drug. And that's why you kind of see with 2 doses, the 95% and the 94% for Moderna. Johnson & Johnson, yes, they came out and their number was about 66%. But actually 85% of those people did not have severe symptoms, at least from their preliminary data that they've shared. But to me, that's a very, very important tool that we have, that instead of having to wait for 2 doses, 1 dose can actually give you some protection. It may not be the 95, but the 66 to me is what everybody was initially expecting based on historical data from all the other vaccines that we've done, and the 95s, which is excellent. But it doesn't mean that the Johnson & Johnson one is any less effective. It is still a very great tool. And the number of vaccines that we can get out there that are protective of people, the better. Does that kind of answer the question? I hope. So they're a little bit different, but they all offer the same protection, which is prevention of you having severe COVID disease.
I think that was a good explanation. So thank you so much for that. How do you know that you are allergic to the COVID vaccine when you have not gotten it before?
How do you know? I think it was Dr. Kevin who. So there are people who have had history of anaphylaxis to a variety of things, and for such people, I think taking caution is for anything they do is important. But in every case, when you get a vaccine, that's why, because you don't know. That's why they have to observe you for maybe 15, 20 minutes because any serious allergic reactions will happen within that time frame. So the simple answer is you don't know. That's why you have to wait around for a little bit after you got the vaccine, before they let you go.
Yeah, and those are the ones that should not get the second dose of the vaccine. If you've had such a reaction to the first one.
So I have just a question based off of your responses. So if someone was allergic to the initial response of the vaccine, what should they do to ensure they have a protection from COVID-19? Should they try to get a different vaccine? Should they try to get the 1-dose vaccine? So what should someone do in the event they are allergic?
So I don't have a great answer to that question as far as vaccinations, but one thing that we do know is that the practice of wearing face mask, social distancing, those are effective. I'm a testimony of that. Myself and my colleagues, and I'm sure Dr. Onyema too, have been taking care of COVID patients, and we've been taking care of the sickest of the sick with ventilated and having all sorts of crazy stuff. And even in my ICU, maybe one of us at the beginning of all of this got infected. So those barrier methods do work. even in close proximity to those patients. So that's typically what I would advise those people who have allergic reactions, because the goal here is to eradicate it so that we stop spreading it from one person to another.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you all for answering that question. Moving on to the next question. And I'm going to combine these two questions. Who has a registry for all of the COVID-19 vaccines and their various stages of approval? And how can we be sure that the same vaccines sent to African countries are the same quality as those used in the USA and or Europe? Yes, a very thought-provoking question indeed.
It is an interesting question just because I think a lot of people are thinking about how do we vaccinate those countries where the sub-zero freezers may be difficult to come by, like what vaccines can be there that can be at room temperature for prolonged periods of time for the time it would take to get to those areas that need it. I mean, I can't say I'm, working in the supply chain to be able to ensure and do all those checks, though I know these medications are highly, highly regulated. So I think it would be difficult to disrupt that kind of supply chain in that way. I'm not saying it's not impossible, but knowing that there's a concerted effort for these companies to ensure that their vaccines can last outside of a sub-zero temperature or storage or whatnot, I think that points towards maybe their want to be able to be widely distributed to places like Africa and where their issues of sub-zero temperatures might come up. But I can't say that, so I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I'll say one of the encouraging things, and I'm very glad that we have, so many candidates, so many companies coming out with different vaccines, is that it's not a one fits all. For example, specifically in Nigeria, I don't know that we have the infrastructure to support a vaccine like Pfizer. Even within the United States, a lot of those vaccines are being placed in different hubs, big hospital systems that actually can create those environments for the vaccine to be effective and not go inert, essentially. So a lot of it is going to depend on the infrastructure as well as the government support to do something that's a little bit far-reaching. But I'm hopeful. There's some companies that I think are looking at oral versions of vaccines, but it's still too early since that data is not available. So for right now, I don't know.
And honestly, it's to government's benefits, not to get super political, but like that their citizens are healthy so that business can continue, life can continue. So I think governments definitely need to make very concerted efforts to make sure they're getting effective medications so that their economies can get back to where they were or better.
And it makes sense to be concerned about, our family and friends that are in other countries, particularly in Africa. So I understand where this question is coming from, but I think the same thing that we're doing now, when we find out what vaccines are going there, do the research on them, find out what their efficacy is and how they're going to be storing it and all those things. So we're not saying just do things blindly. Once we find out what's going there, if you want to know if it's going to work, look at the research behind it, get the knowledge that you need.
Thank you all so much for answering that question. The next one kind of goes back to what we're talking about. And it's, why do you think Africa is encouraged to wait to get their COVID vaccines from the Gavi vaccine process and not what the West is getting now? And I think somebody really mentioned something that's important, is that the infrastructure really matters. I was recently reading about Nigeria's attempts to buy these freezers for the Pfizer vaccine because we don't have that. Just even the lack of oxygen with treating patients shows that we do not have the infrastructure for certain vaccines. And also these are really expensive, very, very expensive. I can't remember how much it was, but I remember I read the total and I was like, that's a lot of money. So is anybody able to speak on the Gavi vaccine process and how that might benefit African countries in the future? And it's okay for us to not know. That's something that we talk. Yeah.
I don't know.
It's something that we've talked about, is that we are not going to know all the answers for these questions. Our panelists are very informed, but like I said earlier, it's something that is changing and new information is being provided every day. So for whoever it was that asked that question, I hope understanding that we don't have the infrastructure in most of these countries to be able to keep the vaccines that are currently being provided is a good enough answer for you for now. And hopefully you're able to do the research as well and find the proper answer and share it with us.
Well, I asked that question because I know with the Gavi vaccine process, they make it especially for Africans and third world countries. And that is what raises a lot of concerns among the Africans, because in the West, we know what we are getting, but through this Gavi process where they make specially for poor countries, how do we guarantee what we are getting? This is Sister Caroline.
So I'm actually looking up their organization, and it's created to improve access to new and underused vaccines. So it's not necessarily that they are creating specific vaccines just to give to Africans and then everyone else is not able, like it's something special. What they do is that they try to provide the resources so that countries that might not be able to afford these vaccines. Uncle Kola said that the Western countries have basically taken all the Moderna and Pfizer allotments as of now. So what they're doing, and I've read this too, that a bunch of African countries are going together to buy, to putting in money to buy so that they can provide. So what they're doing is that they are working together to provide the resources so that African countries are able to do that. But yes, like I said, if you do have any comments, please put them in the chat just so that it doesn't cause confusion. And we'll try our best to make sure that our panelists are answering that and we are doing the research that we can at this time. So, but thank you very much for explaining that, and I hope that was a decent enough explanation, and we'll go on to the next question.
Every question that does not relate within the country.
Oh, Geraldine, I think you're muted.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Sorry, Chika, I don't know if you had a question, but if you did, could you just please enter it into the chat? Your screen is kind of freezing up for me, but okay, okay, great. Thank you so much, Eunice, for answering those questions and clarifying for everyone. I'm going to move on to the next question. I think this is kind of just an important question. I think people kind of answered this a little bit before, but I think it's an important question to revisit for the people that may have not heard why everyone everyone with their different specialties is a proponent for the vaccine. So if we could kind of really quickly go through each of the different panelists and kind of just talk a little bit about why you specifically, with your background in your specialties, are a proponent for the vaccine.
Okay, so if we look at healthcare in this country, and we look at some of the killers that we know in this country, like heart disease and cancer. Right now, COVID has surpassed heart disease and cancer as the #1 killer in the U.S. So this is a big deal, and it's done it within a year. So if you can, if you ask yourself, right, if somebody can, tell you, wear your mask, wash your hands, and if you do that, you have a high chance of preventing cancer and you have a high chance of preventing heart disease, would you do it? This disease has caused a lot of turmoil, not just in the U.S., throughout. Right, we've all been affected individually, and as it is, it's not just about me getting my own vaccine. I depend on everybody else around me to get vaccinated. So me taking the vaccine is just a small bit of fighting this disease, and it really takes everybody else to to do the same, for us to make any headway in fighting this disease. So for me, it's a no-brainer. Should I or should I not get it? It's a matter of when, and I got it as soon as it was available to me. So that's it for me.
For me, I have personally seen, well, I lived this devastation, unfortunately, and it is #1 reason I took the vaccine. I took it because the data was impressive. It was a no-brainer. And #2, because I did it to protect my community and my family as a Christian. That's one of the things. That's one of the ways that I show love to my neighbors, is trying to do my part to protect all of us. As a physician that does take care of COVID patients in the ICU, it's devastating to talk to family members, old, young, and this is not just a disease that's killing people, old people. This is a disease that's also devastating. A lot of people hear about the 400,000+ that are dead, but very few of us are talking to those people who have what we call morbidities, meaning that they can't do what they used to do before. I cannot tell you how many young people in their 20s have come to the ICU because they had stroke, not because they had diabetes or they were overweight, but because they contracted COVID. And somebody who's a 28-year-old woman now has a large stroke because of COVID infection. She's not, parts of her body are not working like they used to before. Her future is devastated, and that could have a generational influence. So this is devastating beyond just deaths. This is, yeah.
Yes, as a family medicine and public health specialist, I'm advocating for the vaccine because it's an additional preventive measure that can help all of us get back to normal life. I think this pandemic is a great example of how important prevention is. An ounce of prevention on time, could have prevented majority of those 400,000 deaths in, and this is America. And for people who say the virus is not real, you need they come to our hospitals. I know people from church who have died of the virus, and the patients. I know family friends who have died of the virus. And we can't build enough hospitals. We cannot buy enough ventilators. We cannot produce enough doctors and nurses to treat this disease. The best way to get it under control, vaccine or no vaccine, is prevention. It looks so simple, but we can see how devastating this can become if we don't unite behind what we know works. And we have so many different opinions that have no factual basis that is costing hundreds of thousands of lives.
And for me, as an internal medicine physician, I'm very passionate about preventive health. Just like Dr. Kola was saying, if you can prevent a disease, then life is going to be so much better as far as you won't pay the cost of having to treat it and deal with all the consequences of it. So usually I'm so focused on heart disease and diabetes and all these other things, which are still very important. But the fact that COVID-19 in this 2021 has killed 2 people every single minute, that is just an incredible number. It is by far the biggest health crisis that we have going on right now. So I'm a big proponent for the vaccine because we have to stop this. We have to prevent it. And yes, a lot of people say that, oh, well, if I get it, I'll be fine. But you don't know all the people that you can pass it on to. And the problem is that so many people are passing it on to their loved ones. They're saying, oh, I can't go without seeing my mother. Let me go and visit my mother. And though you may do fine, you don't know what could happen to your mother. So I'm a proponent of the vaccine because I want to stop this cycle of infecting our communities and spreading the virus and causing all this death and morbidity, and especially among our people. That is the biggest thing about everything that's going on. So people that look like us, the African community, the Black community, the minority communities, we're the people who don't want to have anything to do with this virus, but we are the ones getting hit the worst by this disease. We're the ones that are, even though we make up a smaller population, the smaller percentage of the population in this country, we're the ones that are dying at a higher rate. So something has to be done. And I do strongly believe that getting this vaccination is going to be our first step in getting back to a normal life and being able to fellowship and have church and have gatherings and all the things that we want to do. But we need to get this vaccine so that we can actually get there and that we can protect ourselves and our families and our communities. That's why I support it.
Yeah, I, as a pharmacist, last year, when this pandemic really hit us as a country, I had to do a lot of deep diving into a lot of data, more than I've ever done for any other thing. Like, I'm always asking my team, like, I have all the data to say that we need to do this. Where's yours? Because you're wrong. So that's me all day. And so when this vaccine first came out and they were talking about maybe phase 1, phase 2, all these things, I was very unsure. And I wanted to be sure of that this was really effective, that all the checks and balances have been made about this vaccine. So I relate with the people who were hesitant. I think many of us were, just because this was new to us. And after finally reading the hundreds of pages of the studies, of the protocols, of everything that they sent to the FDA, I have that confidence to say, I trust this process. I trust the process behind the approval. I trust the process behind the evidence. I trust it. Not to say that, that there's no room for error. There potentially is, but at least I can speak in alignment with the confidence that I have treating other things to say that this is something that could work. And just, as Christians, we believe in a relational God, and God created us for relationship, for community. And this virus has really decimated that for a lot of people. There are just other things outside of this virus. This virus has killed, I just looked yesterday, New York, their death count was at 43,000 yesterday. Like, imagine one event in one day that wipes out 43,000 people. Like, we would do everything we could to make sure that never happened again. And so I'm just thinking of all the people that have died from this virus, or the side effects of what this pandemic has done to mental health, to just them avoiding clinic, right? We have patients that you're supposed to do virtual visits with that can't get their phones to work or don't have smartphones. And those patients are now filling up our hospital beds because they delayed care for the entire 2020 year. So, and they're sicker. People are sicker. People are more stressed. I want to get back to community, the healing community. I want to get back to our old desires of just prevention I want to remove this risk from any other thing that we've been dealing with already up to 2020. And so that's why I'm a big proponent of this vaccine, is that this is one of the most effective things to get us there, to get us to that herd immunity, is this vaccine, so that we can safely gather in church, so that we can safely meet with people, we can safely have our clinic visits, we can safely do all these things because of this vaccine.
Wow. Thank you all so much for sharing those insights. I know for so many of us who are not seeing patients, it might not feel real, and it might feel like the world is just making a big deal. But I think what you have really shared has driven the point that this is something that we all have to work together to help. Maybe not necessarily eradicate, as they're saying might not happen, but make a lesser situation. I know for me, both of my parents are working in the healthcare field. And when my mom shared that her unit became a COVID unit, that I didn't sleep for a week because she's older. And for me, that was concerning, that my mother would be dealing with this. And the day that she told me that she was getting vaccinated, I cried. And I thanked God, because it felt like, Lord, hopefully we are seeing the end of the tunnel, or we're seeing the light at the end. I know there's so many people who have questions that we were not able to get to, but we want to honor the time that we said. This is hopefully a new generation of ACF that keeps to time with our events. And so we just want to say thank you so much to everyone who has logged in, who has asked questions, to our panelists. Thank you for taking the time out. I know you have very busy schedules, and your life is looking a lot different than it did a year ago. And so we really just appreciate that. And yeah, thank you for that. Geraldine, if you want, Uncle Sam, if you want to give any announcements, sorry.
One thing I was going to put too is that for masks, and this is a lot of what I see, unfortunately, I had to grab a mask to kind of demonstrate. It should go above your nose and cover your mouth, because spreading with aerosol droplets, that's the way that this spreads. I typically look crazy because I also have a face shield, because I recognize that if somebody's talking within my vicinity, you can also get on my face. And a lot of us do not wash our face. We may touch our hands, go home and kind of touch our loved ones. So washing your hands, doing all of that works. The mask this does not protect you, please, because I see a lot of this. I also see a lot of this. That's also not effective. So please, it needs to cover your nose and your mouth. Ideally, if this was a perfect world, everybody would use the N95 mask, which is effective because not all masks are created the same. But I would say a barrier method, any barrier method is better than none at all.
Thank you for that. Please put on your masks. they're there to help. Please put those on, at least until you're able to get vaccinated, in which case you still keep them on to protect those around you. But thank you for giving us that information. Uncle Sam, you keep coming in and out. You can take over and round us up and end this with some prayer. And I know somebody asked, we are recording this and we will make sure that we are able to provide this. I think it's very helpful. And I'm sure there are people that you want to send this to. So we'll make that available for you as soon as we can.
All right. Excellent, excellent. Everybody, without unmuting yourselves, please give everyone on the panel a round of applause. Don't unmute yourself, but just clap silently, the Zoom clap. Now, this has been wonderful. It's been wonderful. Let me start. I just want to—
Good job, everybody.
Thank you, sir. I want to make a few comments. One is to say a big thank you to the East Region leadership, especially the East Region Young Adult team for putting this session together. This has been excellent. So thank you to every one of you. I do want to single out and thank our hosts and moderators, Chinelo Ezeka, Geraldine Ezeka, Eunice Kentade for hosting us today. And behind the scenes, there are a host of other people who are supporting them and helping them to put this together. So thank you to everyone on the team for making this possible. What can we say about our panelists? Thank you so much for bringing your knowledge to bear. Drs. Immanuel, Oluchi Immanuel, Kevin Immanuel, Dr. Eze Onyema, Dr. Chioma Obih, Dr. Kola Okuyemi, wonderful panelists. We are blessed to have in our community amongst us people who have knowledge, tremendous knowledge, outstanding knowledge to present to us at times like this. We thank God for giving you to us, and thank God for giving us the knowledge that we need for this season. We know that knowledge is important, and we will take the information you provided to us and use them in making decisions for ourselves and for our community. So we can't say thank you enough for your beginning. I do want to repeat that ACF, the African Christian Fellowship, cannot force anyone to do anything. We are in a position, by the grace of God, to provide the information. And God has given us the individuals who know what they're talking about. And all we have done today is to be a platform to provide this information to all of us. It's up to each one of us to make our decisions for ourselves. And we pray that God will give us the wisdom to apply the information we have received from the panelists. They did disclose that they don't know everything, so they may not have provided you all the information you need. In this day and age, we can all do a little bit of research on our own. And when in doubt, there are always some CDC always have something to say. So please, let's avail ourselves of that information. At the end, though, we recognize that no matter how much information we get, no matter who we talk to, that at the end, God really is the one who gives us life. He is the one who holds our life. He is the one who holds our future. And so all of what we've heard today is important. What we do is important, but our reliance is on God completely. And so as we wrap up this session today, we want to commit each one of us, our loved ones and our community, into God's hand, and pray that the Lord will give us grace, give us what we need, not just us, but the people who are taking care of us, that the Lord will continue to provide them the knowledge that they need to be caretakers of the world that He has created. And so we'll close this out in prayer and turn it back over to each of us, but more importantly, turn our lives into God's hands and ask Him to continue to direct us. But once again, on behalf of the African Christian Fellowship, thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you for all of our members. Thank you for all the people who organized this. Shall we pray? Father, in Jesus' name, we are thankful that you are the Lord of our lives. Thank you, Lord God, that while COVID-19 may have been a surprise to us as human beings, Lord God, nothing surprises you. Thank you, Lord God, that even before we dreamed of COVID-19, Father God, you have already provided resources for us to be able to overcome. Thank you, Lord God, that even at this time, as we begin to find ways, Lord God, to relieve ourselves of the diseases that may come as a result of the pandemic. Lord God, we know that you already have gone ahead of us. And Lord God, you have prepared our future. And so we commit each one of us into your hands. We thank you that we have the privilege to always approach the throne of grace and to seek your face at all times. And Lord, Father, may we never deviate from that. May that always be our focus. That whatever is going on around us, Lord, you will remain the Lord of our lives. You will remain the focus, the center of our lives, and that you alone will receive all the glory and honor and praise. Thank you for our panelists. Thank you for the knowledge that have brought to us today. Father, we pray that we will focus on understanding what they have said and using that knowledge base, oh God, to help ourselves, to help our community. And at the end, Lord God, you will receive all glory, honor, and praise. Blessed be your holy name. In Jesus' name, we have prayed. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good afternoon. Bye.
Excellent.